It's my absolute delight and pleasure to welcome Konstantin back onto the channel. You'll all know him as one of the most respected voices on YouTube about what is happening inside Russia. And what is happening inside Russia is accelerating. The express train of economic chaos is arriving. It's pulling up in the station. Until now, we've heard its distant call, far away. We really weren't sure when it was going to arrive, but we knew that this is a one-way train track and that it would arrive eventually. Well, it's here, and that's what we're going to discuss today in the episode. Before we do, huge thank you to everybody who supports Konstantin and his work, especially those who become members of his channel, subscribe to his channel, and of course help financially. Many of you will know that there have been monetization issues there on his channel. So those people who choose to support his work, immensely grateful to those. And of course, anyone who supports my channel via buy me a coffee or Patreon, or just subscribe and share around the videos. Anyone who does any level of support, it's extremely, extremely gratefully received. Now let's jump into the topic, because here we are, Constantin. The moment is arriving. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum has just happened, and it was quite an extraordinary spectacle. Were you expecting the kind of openness, actually, of some of the regime economists that we heard there?
Jonathan, good to see you. Good to be here again, as always. Thank you for inviting. Good questions in general, and this is an excellent question. I did not expect anything like that to happen at St. Petersburg Economic Forum. And what happened, and basically, Russia's top officials stood up, well, some of them at least stood up and spoke semi-truth. At least they didn't lie. They spoke between the lines, but they spoke of the situation that is happening right now in Russia. And wow, that was amazing. Did not expect that.
And it's in sharp contrast, isn't it, to the kind of tone that Putin was adopting for the first time, perhaps, that I can remember. Well, ever since he was challenged by Khodorkovsky all those years ago, you heard what Putin was saying and his positions, and some kind of sharp contrast or even contradiction to what some of his officials are saying.
It was incredible because they usually don't speak against their boss. And he was giving a speech of fantastic success that Russia has come to, the victory, the circumventing the sanctions, economy is getting strong again, the future is so bright, just have to wait a little bit. And right in the next room, the next door to him, there was a bunch of his servants, those people who, submit economic information for his information, for him to read and to know. And the very same people were speaking very harshly of the current state of the economy. In the future, they weren't so hopeful about that either. This is a sign that something is happening in Russia. You would definitely see it's not even a bulldogs fighting. I would say Russia is not well. It's feverish. It's shaking, and it's definitely at the stage where it's becoming visible. You know how a person gets sick, and if it's something serious, when the sickness develops, you can't really see the symptoms. Just not feeling well somewhere inside. But then, at the later stages, person can't speak, can't walk, can't talk, can't see well, and so feverish and sweating, and this is what we start seeing right now.
And will they be hacking limbs off next? Is that the next stage? Are we going to see some serious issues? I mean, I sort of know the answer to this. We've got banks, we've got the property industry, we've got consumer credit. All of these are sort of flashing red, showing major issues. And there's this extraordinary graph that I saw shared around, and that is the consumer credit default and mortgage defaults. They look like they're going up exponentially. It's quite an extraordinary figure.
Carport defaults as well, don't forget. Um, um, like you said, the train has arrived. We are seeing the results of the actions that Russia did 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when, I mean, we have spoken about this on these live streams with you so many times. I start feeling like a broken record because that's what I keep on talking about, the tsunami, but I don't make forecasts any longer. At this point, I just explain what is happening in numbers and facts and figures. And I don't even have to explain myself any longer. All I have to do is to cite the top officials. Makarov, Senator Makarov, who's in charge of the committee for finances in the Russian parliament, Elvira Nabiulina, Maxim Oreshkin, Reshetnikov, and other people. All I have to do is to quote them. That's it.
And
It's
it's
bad.
not,
I'm going to be
yeah.
doing a live stream dedicated to this particular topic, numbers and figures of Russia demise. That's going to be done today, and then I plan on doing it every single week because economy is becoming topic number one. Because economy is shaking, and it's we start seeing it falling apart, and that's the most important thing in Russia right now. Because without a strong economy, Putin is powerless.
And of course, his war is unsustainable, and indeed, the territories that he thinks he's conquered, holding on to them becomes unsustainable if the economic power isn't there to support it. And this is no longer speculation. I mean, there are so many comments that come against our videos saying, we're making this up. And sometimes they quote BRICS and this and the multipolar world and goodness knows what other kind of guff that they post here. But this is no longer speculative. We're pointing, as you say, to the pronouncements of key regime economists. We're pointing to specific areas of the economy, stats and figures released by the system itself that are
Yes.
no longer hide the scale of the problem. We are dealing in facts and figures now, not speculation, and I think that's important. Up until now, we've maybe scrabbled around a little bit, and it's been difficult to try to prove this case. But now we have the detail, and we can point to particular parts of the economy. One of the big ones, of course, is the PMI contraction. That is the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index. So this is a key indicator of not just sort of consumer health, but actually manufacturing health in the sort of deep economy. And that has just had a 47.5, that's gone down to 47.5, which is the sharpest contraction since March 2022. These are really important. The fact that there's a perfect storm hitting manufacturing, hitting exports, and coming at this point in time.
If you want to understand Russian economy and then its current state, you have to look at the whole economy. It's it, you have to understand that there's a perfect storm above Russia and its economy, and it was caused by Vladimir Putin and his decision to invade Ukraine. And this perfect storm has been staying above Russia, spinning, and it's not going in a way anywhere, and it's affecting entire economy, every single industry, every single part. The only part of the economy, the only industry that is doing well, magnificently well, is funeral business. Those folks are recording, record earnings and profits, and they're happy. We saw them at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. There was a couple who owns pretty much half of the industry in Russia. They were having a good time, eating black caviar, dancing, and everything's fine with them. Their empire is doing quite well. Everyone else is not so well. All the industries are declining, and some are dying, really dying. For example, coal industry is near dead. they started recently in the last couple of weeks. They started closing down big mines and just throwing people to the streets by thousands. Never happened before. Pulp and wood industry, pulp and paper industry in Russia is pretty much in the same situation. The government had to step in and give some money to some companies. I mean, anywhere you look right now, a person I know well called me this morning and from Russia and said, never listened to me before, okay, but today called me and asked, can you please explain what's going on? Because it's quite something unusual, odd. You know, near my house, there's a market, like farmer's market, and we have food kiosks closing there. Okay, that's that bad. Okay. So this perfect storm has affected everything in Russia, and out of reserves, no money to throw to patch up holes, and we are seeing the decline, the demise, landslide, whatever you want to call it. But we're seeing it. Like you're right, it's not speculations anymore. It's just observations.
And I was going to save this to last because we're going to come back to the economy, but we're also seeing, and I think this is interesting as well, isn't it, that the Russian vertical is built on the ability to command resources and to pass those resources out to those who are loyal to you. But also foreign policy to an extent is also built on the ability to project power. And projecting power takes a lot of resource to do. We're now seeing Azerbaijan, I mean, we saw Armenia last year, realize that Russia is no longer supporting it and starting to move away from the Russian world. Azerbaijan felt that were still benefiting from a certain degree of closeness to the Putin regime, especially as they were able to, take Nagorno-Karabakh, and Russia did nothing about that. Now Azerbaijan seems to be exiting the orbit of the Russian world, and Z patriots are going out of their minds. Could you describe a bit what's going on? Because this may not be exactly clear to people not immersed in these issues.
We can look at Azerbaijan issue right now that is happening and developing right now as we speak. But I suggest we step away a little bit and take a look at the bigger picture. Okay. Azerbaijan is just a part of the big game, the big trouble that is happening to Russia. Azerbaijan is the latest in the series of fallen outs, the latest country that is fallen out of Russia's influence. And it's not happening right now. It happened actually some time ago. Right now, we're seeing an eruption, so to speak. Azerbaijan was always hostile towards Armenia, and they had a war in 1994. The two former Soviet republics, then basically after the breakdown of the USSR, they immediately went into war over the disputed territory called Nagorno Karabakh. The Armenians claimed it was theirs, and the Azerbaijanians didn't think so. So they had a war, and Russia stepped in, and Russia helped Armenia. And with help of Russia, Armenia ended the war victorious, kept Nagorno Karabakh, and Russia supplied Armenia with advanced weapon systems, and it placed its military base there. And peace was achieved, but the Azerbaijanians, they didn't really agree to Armenians having that land. They always felt like Nagorno Karabakh was part of Azerbaijan, and Russia was always sort of arbiter, the judge of this dispute. As soon as Russia got weak, back in 2022, Azerbaijan started acting. They started using their master state, Turkey. They started pressuring Russia into basically leaving Armenia behind. And a deal was made between Putin and Aliyev. And Russia basically sold Armenia to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan attacked again, and Russia didn't do anything. Armenia is a part of ODKB, this collective security agreement, and according to, it's like NATO only for some of former Soviet states, and according to the ODKB article of mutual defense, Russia had to step in the minute Azerbaijan started moving on to Armenia. And it didn't. It just stepped aside and was watching how Azerbaijan was taking Nagorno-Karabakh. And then Russia sided with Azerbaijan. And that's it. That was when Azerbaijan fell out of Russia's influence because there was no reason to be friends with Russia any longer. Okay, Aliyev has some kind of personal relationship with Putin, sort of friendship. I'm not sure how strong it is. Well, I know that Azerbaijan started acting very differently after it gained Nagorno-Karabakh back. And it started basically, conducting its own political actions. And Azerbaijan is a fairly strong country. It enjoys a high status in the region. It's strategically located, between Iran, Russia, Turkey. So Azerbaijan historically has, there are 17 million Azerbaijanians living in Iran. So it has ties with Iran and some relationship with Iran. And it started exerting power of sovereign state. And then, of course, Russia made it worse by shooting Azerbaijani Flight 8243 of Azerbaijani Airlines in December of last year. And not only they shot it thinking it was a drone or enemy plane, which is kind of insane to me, but it was near Grozny. But when they realized they shot it, they didn't allow it to land anywhere close to Grozny. Instead, they turned it around and forced it to go to cross the Caspian Sea and land in Kazakhstan. And, well, obviously they were thinking that the plane that was shot by a Russian missile wasn't going to make it, Embraer jet, wasn't going to make it, would crash into the Caspian Sea. And so no one would find out it was shot by a Russian missile. Well, miraculously, the plane crash landed in Aktau, and, well, you know the story. Half of the crew survived, half of passengers survived, and they showed that they told everyone the story, how Russians shot the plane. And I don't know why, but the Russians gave medals to those who shot the plane the day after. Instead of apologizing, saying, well, you know what, things happen, and they awarded highest honors to those who shot the plane. And Vladimir Putin didn't accept any responsibility. He kind of apologized between the lines, but that did not help failing Russian-Azerbaijani relationship. And now what Russia has done to Azerbaijanians inside Russia is absolutely insane. I don't understand the reason behind going after Azerbaijani community in different Russian cities. But obviously, Azerbaijan started acting back, and this is a cold war between Russia and Azerbaijan right now. And there's a great falling out. The relationship has been damaged to a point I think it's going to be real hard to be restored. But if we look at the little bigger picture, Azerbaijan is the last country that has fallen out of Russia's sphere of influence. Armenia, obviously, it fell out when it was betrayed by Russia. And Russia doesn't let Armenia go because, Armenian society is infiltrated by Russian operatives. And now the Armenian president is taking a very strong stand on getting rid of Russia's influence inside Armenia. He's arrested oligarchs connected to Russia. He has arrested the head of Armenian church, also connected to Russia. So he's purging the society of Russian control. Uzbekistan, I know it quite well, is also, not so openly, but surely, slowly but surely, fallen out of Russian control. Moldova, Russia had a fiasco with Moldova. Moldova clearly made its choice. It's geared towards, it's moving towards Europe, and it's leaving the CIS. Well, the CIS is a dead organization anyway, but Moldova is officially a part of the CIS still, and it's leaving. Georgia, oh my gosh, people of Georgia, they don't like Russia. Then Russia is trying to do everything to not let Georgia go. We know the story. There is a fight, but there are forces inside Georgia, and it's not like mythical enemies of Russia or whatever. It's just Georgian people. They want to be independent. They want to make their own decisions. So there's a big struggle. I've seen it with my own eyes. There are tents in front of the government building in Georgia. Tbilisi is a very small city. It's a lot of people, but territory is not that big. And I've seen the what's going on right next to the government building. People actually are camping in front of it with big signs and constant protest. So Putin has had quite a few fiascos since he invaded Ukraine. And besides that, he's lost Syria, he's lost Iran as his ally, and everyone in the world is seeing that. And Russia is collapsing not just inside economically, but its geopolitical influence is also collapsing.
It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? And we've still got some way to go. There's still more interesting shocks there. Let's get back to the economy because I think this is absolutely fascinating. You've got, as you said earlier, Maxim Reshetnikov saying that the country is on the verge of going into recession. He is the economy minister, so again, we're not making stuff up here, false accusations. This is actual Russian government ministers. And Vladimir Putin even acknowledged that, but then came out with an extraordinarily delusional statement. Some specialists and experts, he said, are pointing to the risk of stagnation or even recession. This is not to be allowed under any circumstances. That's like saying, I don't like this gravity thing, right? Objects mustn't fall under any circumstances. What on earth is he going to do or can he do to try to avoid what seems to me to be sort of, economic rules, like the rules of physics?
I really wish I could get a peek inside Putin's head. Is he just making things up because he doesn't care about what, how people see it, how they talk about it, how analyze his speeches, or perhaps he believes in what he says? It's really hard to say. I thought that he makes things up, or he takes, information that is basically not true and projects that information to the public because he doesn't care. But now I start thinking that he kind of believes in what he says. Okay, because I mean, it's really difficult to say these things if you know they're not true and if you don't believe them. Jonathan, what can I say? That guy is odd. He contradicts himself. Yesterday, he came out with a statement saying that the defense budget will have to be decreased over the next few years. Today, he came out saying that by the year of 2030, Russia will have to rebuild infrastructure of the new territories, build schools, hospitals, roads, and make lives of people, the locals, better. Only in 2030. Okay, so he's one day he's spending, I don't know, tens of trillions rubles to restore the infrastructure. Well, he promises to restore the infrastructure, and then The next day he says, we got to cut the defense spendings. So it's I don't know what's the English word for what's the English term for поток сознания.
Stream of consciousness. It's like,
Well,
or brain
it's
dribble, which in
brain
Putin's.
dribble. Yes,
Yes.
something is coming out of his brain that doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. So
Yeah. Yeah, it seems that way. I started to think that previously he was agnostic. He'd say stuff and he was very verbally dexterous. When he used to do those long Valdai press conferences, yes, the questions were planted. Yes, he kind of knew what was going to come up and he has a whole team of people to help him prepare, but he was still very verbally dexterous in those events. It seems to me that you have to have a certain level of cynicism to be able to answer the way he did to all those things with absolute conviction. Now it seems that what he's saying is so detached from reality, and he doesn't have that verbal or intellectual. He was never an intellect, but you know what I mean. He doesn't have that kind of dexterity of mind that he used to, and I'm afraid that he believes some of this stuff, or like entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, sometimes if you're in a position of extraordinary power, you feel you can transform the world around you, that the laws of physics don't apply to you, the laws of economics and politics don't apply. I think he's partly in that mindset of absolute denial of reality, or maybe he no longer lives in any kind of recognizable reality.
that's what it looks like. Increasingly looks like. Um, an interesting thing of the topic a little bit. For the first time in a long time, I started feeling the vibes of Putin thinking of who's going to be after him, his successor. Um, I think it's fairly possible that he thinks that he can um, pass the power on to his relatives. He's the czar. He's not elected any longer. He did you see his daughters spoke at St. Petersburg International Economic
The
Forum?
first time I can recall any of his relatives, being publicly visible in that way.
Yeah, I remember. I remember daughters speaking publicly couple times, not much. But this is the first time that they started being sold as experts, as professionals, as the next generation, so to speak. And this could be something in it. So interesting. Things are heating up and they're getting interesting.
It is interesting. I doubt whether they'd have the power and I wouldn't call it respect, but they wouldn't be able to command the fear over the vertical of power that he does, unless he's still the power behind the throne. But that's interesting. I mean, the other big question before we go back to the economy is it seems to me that dictatorships are forever until they're no more. They're eternal until suddenly they're gone, and that you could have this extraordinary moment where people were like, Putin, who? No, 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 I never supported that guy. Terrible guy. That literally we could wake up one morning and it's changed. What are the different scenarios in which that could happen? And could it happen in your view?
Jonathan, I think it will happen. It will happen. Mark my words, please. You and everyone watching right now. It's happened twice in Russia already. Back in 1954, when the cult of Stalin was brought to public, and demolished by Khrushchev, people loved Stalin. Stalin was their god. They had Stalin in their prayers. Well, they didn't pray back then, but Stalin's pictures were everywhere in every single room. He had to be praised by everyone at schools, at the universities, and he was the biggest cult figure in Russia ever. And then, just like that, people woke up, and overnight, there was not one single person in Soviet Union who in the past loved Stalin. They were saying, "Who, us? I will love that guy." Oh, come on. No, no, you're mistaking us with someone else. This is your newspaper article. That's, I don't know. Why are you showing it to me? No, no. And the same thing happened. I witnessed it in the USSR. 1991. The USSR fell apart. Oh boy. Oh boy. The communists who were communists, who were openly criticizing the changes that were happening in the USSR, who um, were just supported the Politburo's decisions, who came out and protested against young people looking to the West. And they were very loud and public about that. And after 1991, in September, well, 21st of August, couple days of complete chaos. And then after a couple days, it was clear that the old country is no more. And guess what? No more communists. Everyone who was a communist, you know, people were burning their partbileti. Partbilet was a little, they called it the book, red book, with a stamp. It was a notification that you were a member of a communist party. And it was one of the main documents for a Soviet citizen. And it gave privileges, and people were actually taking their partbileti and burning them. Okay, and all of a sudden, in September of 91, everyone was Democrat always. And the communists, and if you ask them, what about, in the past? No, even if I said something, I didn't mean it. I was afraid. And those are the people everywhere, in the propaganda, inside Communist Party apparatus, like everywhere. And that happened, and this will happen again. And I guarantee you, this will happen again. We will see the situation when people wake up one day and Putin is no more, and someone else comes out and says, "You know what? We just looked at the secret documents, and they revealed us a lot of facts about Vladimir Putin, and they're not that great." And I'll just start talking about what happened in the years. You know, Someone will mark my words. I want you to mark my words. Someone will come out and say, "Well, look, how is this possible that one guy can be at the helm of the country for 25 years? That's wrong." And everyone will just look around and say, "That's right. That's wrong. That's wrong." And yeah, Putin is our power. Oh my God. Yes, we knew that. We never supported Putin. Were you silent? Well, we were not that public people, but we never supported, we never liked the guy. Obviously, he was a tyrant and all of that. And that will happen in Russia again.
I mean, people forget that, again, we've been here with Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin was the Communist Party leader, if I'm not mistaken, of Ekaterinburg. He was a doctrinal, ideological, commissar, as it were. It was he who gave the instruction to erase the Yusupov mansion, where the Tsarist family were executed because he didn't want any challenges to the communist regime. It was him that erased that significant symbol of the former regime. And then, as if by magic, he becomes one of Russia's greatest Democrats.
In one of my live streams, I gave two videos back to back. One video was from 1983. Boris Yeltsin, he was the biggest boss of Communist Party in Yekaterinburg, a very large province. He was the first secretary of Communist Party of this province, and the boss of the region. And he was the governor. Now he'd be considered a governor. And then he was giving a speech, and it was so full and of enthusiasm, saying, Communist Party is the only way to go. Vladimir Lenin showed us the way. We must live up to his standard. We must live up to his name and all of that. And everyone was applauding, and that was 1983. Then he became the president of Russia, and he went to the United States. He went in front of the Congress and he had a speech, and he ended it with "God bless America." Do you remember that?
Yeah. You say
That
whatever you
was
need to
just
say, right?
yes, yes, yeah. That was just what, like 8 years apart. It was quite an incredible transformation. But one thing back then we all understood, and we never put those people on the spot. Okay, because everyone figured, all right, we lived for 70 years under the communist rule. Everything's changed now. Now we see the light. We see the future. Future is absolutely different. That's great. We're part of the world's family now. Everyone welcomes us. Let's just forget about that dark page in our life. And we're not gonna go there. That's not time. I want to put everyone on the spot. I'm documenting as much as I can of who said what and whose position was on what issues, and I want to put people on the spot in the future. I want them to be responsible for their actions for the first time in Russia's history.
Because so many people are going to try to wriggle out. And I wonder whether some of these economists coming out and saying the things they've said is that they can see the end coming and they want to be on record and say, no, 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 we criticized. Look, when push came to shove, we told the truth. Look at the economic forum that happened there. No, we were already resisting the regime in our own particular way. The most surprising one to me is German Gref, the CEO of Sberbank, who has said, and this is an extraordinary statement, we have not financed a single new investment project since the new year. And he's
Hmm.
basically said that the war economy has sucked up all investment. In fact, it's probably created a huge investment bubble, almost like a Ponzi scheme that's sort of hidden and off books. And he's basically come out and said that private sector investment is frozen. It's done. It's over.
They are finger pointing right now. Well, they start finger pointing central bank to the Ministry of Finance, and they're still together. They're not at war with each other. The only war that is happening between Chemizov and Nabiulina. Okay, but the economic bloc, is still together, it's still solid. But you're right. For the first time, we see them standing up and start saying unpleasant things, the things of truth. They're scared because they know that they are going to be made responsible for what's happened. It's not their responsibility. Well, it's not their result of their work, the demise of Russia. It's the result of Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. That's where the problem is. Well, they're responsible though, because they have been helping Putin. Everyone in Russia had a choice. When Putin invaded, everyone, including the officials, could stand up and say, you know what, I think this is wrong, and I'm not taking part of it. This is criminal, and clearly I'm out. Okay. And I know a lot of people who have done that. But majority of Russians have kept on doing what they were doing. And none of the officials of high caliber did that, except for perhaps Kudrin. Kudrin, well, he kind of half ejected himself from this situation. Kudrin came to Putin and asked to be let go from the government, and Putin gave him the reward for his service, Yandex. It's a very large company that I have not heard from or of Kudrin since 2022. Okay, that's the only official who didn't want to take part in this circus, criminal circus. Everyone else continued. And now they understand that the situation is so bad, there will be questions. And the questions will be to Putin. But Putin is innocent. The Tsar does not make mistakes. The son, the king's son, doesn't have any spots. And if there are problems, then it's not him. It's those who are in charge of certain things. For example, in charge of the economy. Who is that? That's Elvira Nabiulina. She jacked the key interest rate up to 21%. She deliberately killed Russian economy. She froze Russian economy. Or, you know what, that's a big professional mistake, criminal mistake, or perhaps, you know, she is part of this world's country's central bank clique that they get together, and then she was awarded recently an award. She was the best head of the central bank in the world. That certainly she's connected to those Westerners, right? Perhaps she's done that deliberately because she's working for the enemy. We gotta investigate. And the same thing could be and will be done for everyone because they need to make sacrifices. They need to show someone's head to the crowd, saying he's responsible. That's his head or her head. Okay, now we're gonna do things differently, and that's what they're afraid of. They understand it's coming. That's why they started standing up and speaking up. I think that the next St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is not going to be as glamorous, and there won't be many high-level attendees there. Okay, that's going to the next year is going to be perhaps the last one, or if it's not the last one, if it continues in the future, then it's not going to be as significant, important, and public as the previous forums that
Especially now,
happened in St. Petersburg.
if Putin's still in power, then absolutely he's not going to want this public challenge to his position. There is another alternative, of course, which is that he may no longer be in power. It's difficult to imagine exactly how that might come to pass. Much of the Western, and these are analysts and historians. I hear this phrase over and over again, and unfortunately, there's no evidence for it. It's put out as if it's a fact, as if it's a certainty that whoever follows Putin might be worse. That's what they say, might be worse. And yet history shows that following Stalin, we didn't have Beria, we had Khrushchev. Following what's his name in the 70s? Pirad Zastoy, I've forgotten his name. Following, the one who ruled forever and was completely gaga,
Brezhnev.
Brezhnev, following Brezhnev, well, we had two that didn't hang around for long. And then we had Gorbachev. And hang a second, they were better than what came before. And yet all the analysts are saying, no, I mean, there's a real risk of someone far, far worse. Now, my bet is that whichever sort of KGB clique or whoever is making these decisions are going to be saying, look, we really need the West to lift sanctions. We really need to get back into the world economy to clear up this mess. We really need to have a pause from war for a couple of years to rebuild our foreign policy. Right? The only way of doing that is to have a supposed liberal puppet on the throne, someone like Ksenia Sobchak, who is clearly a regime project. She's not a real liberal in any sense. She's an investment, whether it's just she fills a niche in the sort of, hybrid autocracy, or whether she's being groomed for just such a purpose to try and save Russia following Putin's collapse. I think, I'd say we're almost 50-50. I wouldn't say that someone worse than Putin is possible because Putin is bad. Putin is very, very, very bad, and what he's done is bad. So I don't know what your thoughts are there.
So unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. Certainly, it's not going to be worse if someone replaces Putin. I really have hard time understanding how it can be worse. Okay, total war with everyone around Russia, that's not possible. Russia would be crushed immediately. It cannot, move into further into Ukraine. It's stuck. I mean, come on, that's out of the question. What would be a very smart strategy to take Putin and blame him for everything that has happened happens in Russia, and positioning oneself as anti-Putin. And that's if you're anti-Putin, then you basically, instead of looking outwards, saying we want to spread Russian word and world and so forth, you say, well, we really need to take care of our lives. I want to make your lives better. And then you're absolutely right, Jonathan. We need to be the friends with the West for that. We need sanctions lifted and so forth, and that would be the viable strategy. Putin, of course, is at this point, I don't really know whether I can't say that he understands that or not. Um, I think in the past he was normal enough, logical enough to understand that. I mean, he's built all this tools of governing Russia brilliantly. The vertical of power. I mean, he had sharp mind, that's for sure. But now he's so detached from reality. I don't understand. I don't know where he um, realizes things or not.
And he had people
Perhaps
like
he's
Surkov, he was able to appoint very smart people to do the jobs that he couldn't do. I mean, I'm not sure he's a particularly imaginative person himself, but he saw in people like Surkov those who had the brilliance that could be combined with his cunning and ability to manipulate. And he was able to appoint people who were incredibly smart. I think he's lost that capacity as well to appoint anything but sycophants.
loyalty. He's just looking for one thing: loyalty. That's all. By the way, a very interesting observation. I haven't heard it anywhere, but think about this. Maxim Oreshkin, the aide
Mm,
of Putin,
yeah,
um, he wasn't present at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. He
interesting.
was
Yeah.
he was announced as a speaker at the two events, and he simply didn't show up. Okay, so he kind of knows what. I think it's a very calculated move because you just don't do that in Putin's Russia. Okay, if you're part of the system and you don't show up at the events where your boss is at and things like that, but he perhaps foresaw the conversations coming and he didn't want to take a part of it. But I think that's what's going to happen next for him.
And he's an
People will
economist.
just not show up. Oh
Maxim
yeah,
Oreshkin is actually an economist. So he really, being, as you say, a regime official and an economist, it's doubly odd that he wouldn't be there.
yep.
Mm,
Speaking of, Putin used to be a KGB operative, undercover agent in Germany, and some say, he well, I don't know whether it's true or not, but he spent what 6 years in East Germany, the full term, and KGB hired only brilliant minds, rotten hearts, but brilliant minds. He couldn't have made through the KGB school without having a brilliant mind. Okay, that's absolute. That's a fact. Well, fortunately, for I don't know, but
But he
right
wasn't a
now
high
he's. I
level
think it's
strategist, though, was he? I mean, he wasn't super senior, and his career, it's been said,
was
he
not.
wasn't a
He was
huge
not.
high flyer.
But Jonathan, it was an incredible achievement to actually finish the KGB Academy and be placed outside the Soviet Union. Only the best of the best could make that, could do that. And then he managed.
Yeah.
Okay, he
He was from the wrong background as well, wasn't he? I mean, he wasn't necessarily the place where they would typically go for their recruits, so he had to perhaps work even harder to be placed, as you say, in those positions.
in my mind, he was no question about it. He was a brilliant mind, but now he's different age. He's old now, older, I should say. He's been surrounded by people, very few people, for past 25 years. He doesn't talk to anyone. outside his inner circle. He has very few close friends whose opinions he trusts, and they form his opinions on certain things. So they have formed, most likely, opinions on the economy, on the state of Russian opposition, on everything. And Putin is so detached and delusional um, that he doesn't really, he can't make right decisions any longer. That's what I think.
Yeah. And there are plenty of people who, whereas, they don't have the courage to necessarily be in opposition to him, at least they still have the state of mind where they can see that it's going horribly wrong. I think there's enough people who understand that this is not in a good place. And when the wind changes, they'll jump. They'll realign with strength, with somebody who perhaps has the political and indeed intellectual strength to replace Putin. So, we don't know who's going to do the dirty work. But I think that there's historical evidence that that's what happens. There's a good reason why Levin Tiberia was not allowed near power. And I think you might find a sort of collective of people saying, no, that Patrushev can't come in, or these other, ideological bulldogs, Dugin, Patrushev, Malafiev, we're not going to let these people near power because one, they're incompetent, and two, they're vicious.
The take on power is going to be very, very quick. I have this analogy of a tiger. I don't know if you've seen a tiger attack. I've seen videos. Um, it's instant. Tiger sits there and waits for prey. And once tiger understands that it's the most feared predator out there, the strongest one, and when the tiger realizes it can jump and get the prey, it's an instant, and that's it.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think the same thing will happen. There's going to be a lot of preparations, perhaps deal making behind the curtains, but then just like that, we'll wake up in a different country, in a different reality.
They'll move quickly when they sense that the strength is with them, that the power will shift, and
The time was right.
the time is right. I mean, I think I told you this story, which is why I can imagine this happening. And it's a very odd anecdotal one. We'll probably end on this one because I think we've covered most of the economic topics. I remember trying to cross Nevsky Prospect, and the drivers were ignoring the traffic lights, basically. I mean, no one was really paying attention to the traffic lights and what they were doing. One of them was broken, one was working. So it's like, yeah, whatever. But when you had a few people standing by the side of the road, the cars instinctively had power. That they knew that the power's with them and the force of numbers wasn't with the pedestrians. And so the cars were just going, irrespective of what the traffic lights said. And all the pedestrians, no protest. If this was happening in Britain, people would be shouting, they'd be making rude hand gestures at the motorists, there'd be some
Hmm.
form of absolute chaos. Now, here, the pedestrians recognized that the cars had the power, and so they bid their time. But there came this magical point where there were enough pedestrians. There were more pedestrians than there were drivers. And for anyone who doesn't know Nevsky, this is a 6-lane road. You don't wander out into that because you're going to get flattened before you reach the end. There's this magical point where just suddenly all the pedestrians moved into the road. They just moved into the road. No external signal, no external, signs. The drivers all stopped and let them across. Because again, there was this instinctive moment where the drivers knew that power had shifted to the mass of pedestrians. And I found that extraordinary. And I think that's what's going to happen. Suddenly power will shift and it'll be almost imperceptible. But everyone will
The,
know it's shifted, and they'll move with it.
the second you started telling about the crowd and Nevsky, I knew where you were going to, because I've been a part of that crowd, not in Nevsky, in Rostov-on-Don, my city, a large city. same crowd, same buses, same cars, same Prospect Avenue, same situation. Those late days of the USSR, early days of Russia, chaos, and I've been a part of that group of people. And you wait and wait and wait, and 1 second, magical second, it's time to go, and everyone just moves in, and you go along, and then the cars stop, and it's your way of right now.
Yeah.
So I know, it's a brilliant, brilliant analogy.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I think we saw something like that with Prigozhin. We saw, now that didn't work, but we saw the sense that people are looking out for who's going to be the next guy, who's going to be the next power, the next strong person. And, at what point do we need to shift our loyalty? At what point do we need to change the message? And yeah, with Prigozhin, it didn't happen, but you can kind of see some of that underlying expectation or anticipation of that moment.
You're so right on there. Russian army could have ended Prigozhin with just 5,000 troops. He was saying everyone there were 20,000, but in reality it turned out to be 5,000 fighters. So they could have ended with one single airstrike. They had capabilities. The army just turned around and started looking the other way. Prigozhin was moving from Rostov to Moscow. That's 1,000 kilometers. He moved 750 kilometers, I believe. And on the way, he encountered multiple units of Russian army, and they just turned around and they turned away and then looked the other way. Not one single Russian official, Mishustin, Medvedev, the ministers, the KGB, the police, none of them made any statements. They kept on silent, waiting of what happens next, who will be the next ruler.
Yes,
and
yes.
when Prigozhin, it was decided that Prigozhin turned around, the news went with the speed of light everywhere, just because the entire Russia was anxiously waiting what happens next. Just like that. Statements, they had been prepared. Statements by the head of Rosguardia, how bravely they fought against Prigozhin, how they contained, by the KGB, by the federal police, by all the politicians, all of a sudden exploded with information and statements. We saw a practice of what's going to happen in Russia.
We didn't see the alternative statements they wrote and then quickly destroyed, which is welcoming the new czar. Congratulations, Prigozhin. They probably were drafting them
yes.
too.
Probably, yes. Probably.
On that, I think that's an insightful and sort of interesting place to pause for today. Konstantin, thank you so much again for doing these. I think this was I enjoyed this conversation. It feels like it's vindicated a lot of what we've been saying over the last couple of years, because, as you say, the station is pulling, and the train is pulling into the station, and yeah, let's see what happens next.
Thank you, Jonathan. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. Very intellectually pleasing conversation. Thank you. I hope to do that again sometimes in August, perhaps.
I look forward to that, definitely. And let's
Excellent.
see what's changed then. You can guarantee a lot will happen between now and then. Thank you.
Right
Stay
before,
safe.
wait. Right before we go, one more thing. I'm making a forecast, right? I don't think much will happen in the next 6 weeks, because this is summertime. This is vacation season for all Russians, including the politicians. And usually the activity, social, cultural, business activity, dies down in July and first 2 weeks of August. I expect things to pick up pace about second week of August. So we'll see about that. Let's get back to that to this forecast, and then I'll see if I'm right or wrong.
Let's see. Second half of August, people starting to think about coming back from their dachas and vacation and wherever, Turkey and wherever they can go. And yeah, thinking about the future and change. Well, that's it. Well,
From there on, that's going to be mad.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And having the summer to think about stuff, worry about stuff, and well, I'll hold you to that. Let's speak again in August and let's see what signs of change are starting to appear. Constantine, stay safe.
Excellent.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.